All right, so welcome, CJ.
Thank you so much, Dawn. Thanks for the introduction, and thank you everyone for being here. It's been a long journey. I've been working for this vision in arts and agriculture for the last 8 years. I think God may say it goes back even longer than that, when God knew what my journey was going to be, our journey as a team. I feel like as we unify, we become more and more of a team, longer than I started to see the vision. My background in school, I've got an undergrad in chemistry and biotechnology, and then a bachelor's near completed in public administration, and was transferring over to Boston University to get a master's in urban and city planning. When I left New Hampshire, came to Michigan 8 years ago, and started my own companies, essentially in urban and city planning with arts and agricultural development. My for-profit company is DoVine Landscaping. I am contracted by Louhelen Baha'i School. I've been some kind of service there for 6 years. Fred Kester and I, during COVID, restored the entire 110 acres back and are starting an agricultural program on the 110 acres. Kind of still getting the infrastructure up and designing the outdoor classrooms and such currently. My nonprofit is the 2 acres that we've acquired in inner city Lansing. 2 acres is quite a lot for urban development. We got through the Ingham County Land Bank, as you heard from Dawn, and we want to focus on that, urban gardening, urban farming. Those who don't know, Louhelen is rural, but it is outside a food desert, which is Flint, Michigan, if you've heard the stories of the suffering of Flint, Michigan. So we'll go to the next page. First, I want to show you, these are some of our Baha'i members, Jeslyn and Ann, and my wife, Deshawn, in the middle on the picture, planting cucumbers 2 years ago. And strawberries and permaculture is a big part of what we do. So here we are, the first slide. In Grand Rapids, you see in the youth, because we're trying to couple our property to bring forth a lot of our Baha'i and Friends of the Faith youth to kind of learn through our outdoor classroom designs about agriculture and the need for agriculture. Not sure why my bar won't move. There we go. So Norwood Gardens, who are we? We are an organic garden focused on the arts and agricultural, and we are inviting local communities. I mean, we are in an impoverished zone. There's a lot of youth of all minorities, Muslim children, African-American children, African children, Hispanic children in our neighborhood. White is absolutely the minority, and there's red tagged houses, broken down, abandoned houses. It kind of looks like a miniature Flint or a miniature Detroit at its worst of times in this neighborhood. And we've been improving it through the agriculture, even through the drug addiction and the crime that exists. Our garden's permaculture design has perennial fruits and flowers such as apple trees, cherry trees, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, rhubarb, lavender, echinacea, asparagus, roses, daffodils. In permaculture, you want something to be blooming all year round. Whether it's fruit production or flower production, you do all this companion planting to get a sustainable system that blooms and flowers and sustains itself over the years. A lot of work at the beginning of creating permaculture, a lot less work as it starts to get the transformation of the root structure in place. I already touched upon DoVine Landscaping a little bit. That's my for-profit company. I've got customers all over the state of Michigan, and I invest the money back into the community to build this kind of miniature city that I'm trying to build with Norwood Gardens.
CJ, can I just
yes.
ask? I just want to ask a question here. Someone's saying they can't see the slides. Someone just wondered, can everyone see the slides?
I can see them.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure. Someone reported they couldn't see the slides. I think that's maybe their personal issue. Okay.
Thank you so much for that, Dawn. That would be kind of a shame to
I
not.
just want to make sure everyone can see.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So the need for creative urban gardening and urban farming, first off, I mean, the most important thing in greenhouse gas emissions, if we're going to go to a big scale issue today, it's climate change. And not being on the side of climate change denial as Baha'is, I feel like we need to be admitting the truth that humans are in fact causing temperatures to rise across the entire globe. One of the biggest solutions is urban farming. What happens when you have all the rural zones and suburban zones creating all the food and then getting it all loaded in trucks and freezer trucks and moving it to the inner city is the sheer amount of miles that those trucks are hauling all your food. Now, if you were to reverse that curse and have production through vertical farming or urban farming in the city, now, even if you were to transport, most of your population rests in your urban zones, so that wouldn't need to be transported. And then transportation is now only in one direction, out of the city and into the rural environments. And it would drastically cut the amount of fossil fuels that we're using with the hauling industries and the trucker industries. One of the biggest things we can do to help save our planet is in urban farming and vertical farming too. Vertical farming is a big one. We won't touch too much on that. That's another issue. But I do want to kind of plant the seeds of vertical farming and use your independent search of reality to do more studies independently on that. This metaphorically, all food would be going downstream as opposed to upstream metaphorically. I do like that I wrote that. Now, DoVine's residential raised bed initiative, another one of the important parts is education. One of the biggest parts is education. And if we're getting each and every household to know how to have a little bit of agricultural growing, then you can build these homesteads, even in inner city environments, where each home is producing a little bit of food that sustains them beyond what they get from the markets that already exist in our urban infrastructures. So here's some of the designs that I built for customers that are raised beds. The one on the far left, the cedar raised bed structure, I built for one of our Baha'i friends, Jean Gazelle. She hired me to build this. She's a professor at Michigan State University. And I looked at her yard and I started pacing and said, this is the design I drew on a blueprint, said this fits your yard to have the growth and the optimum of sun and rain. And she said, go for it. She said, your blueprints are great. And she said, go for it. Now, in the middle, those are 4 tin raised beds. Notice I'm using materials that do not rot or rust. That's very important if you're going to sustain your infrastructure and raised beds on your front lawns or your backyards. Tin does not oxidize, does not rust, and thus tin becomes a good material to use for raised beds. And those in the back behind me, my nice Boston Red Sox jersey, I lived in New Hampshire for 32 years. It's cucumbers, tomatoes, basil, and then those water tanks that you see behind me. Now it's urban. This is an urban environment. What we have is services, not rural. Rural don't really have the services, but we have services. And so the Ingham County Land Bank is who I got the land from. And then they have the ability to tap into fire hydrants to fill my water tanks. Mm. And I thank God every day that exists. I think Flint, Michigan would be able to do that. Detroit's doing it, and Lansing is doing it as well. I feel like Michigan is really leading the initiative because of the fall of Detroit too. This culture started in Detroit when the anarchy was burning down houses for miles, and then we needed to shift to provide services of our own accord. On the far right, those are more raised beds. Same customer, Jean Gazelle. The one that I built that I'm crunched down on, that's backyard, and then the other one front yard of her home. I'm going to show some more designs. Where I'm petting the dog, that's Ned Walker. He's also a professor at Michigan State University. He's a biochem professor. He traveled the world eradicating mosquitoes or finding ways to eradicate mosquitoes. And he had me come through. This house had overgrowth, weeds all the way to the wall. And so I dug up everything for him, laid down the limestone, built the raised beds, and now that's a lush property. And then the one to the right, that's at Louhelen Baha'i School. Fred Kester and I, we got those raised beds actually from Michigan State University. They were used for turf grass, and then they sold at the surplus store because they were no longer using those plastic tubs for the turf grass at the stadium at Michigan State. We got them from the surplus store, hauled them out to Louhelen, and we didn't want the weeds, so we built the pallet. We have a tractor, so we can lift them, built the pallet stacks, and then use scaffolding to build a rabbit fence around it, and came up with clever ways to now grow food for the kitchen directly at Louhelen Baha'i School. I think this slide is so important, friends. Just because we're as Baha'is, we really, really, really want to focus on the writings and the importance of the arts and agriculture. So I'll read this whole slide. Knollwood Gardens, a food-producing permaculture property, began construction in 2021 as a neighborhood rejuvenation project. There are 2 red-tagged houses and 2 other abandoned homes in Knollwood Gardens' direct neighborhood that we serve. There is also a drug and alcohol issue, with a liquor store being directly on the corner of our dead-end street. We have entered the block with the purest intent to begin urban farming as a remedy to the social struggles, while beautifying the property attained with a strong focus on arts and agricultural education for the neighborhood youth and our community members. Abdu'l-Baha wrote in the Lights of Guidance, strive as much as possible to become proficient in the science of agriculture. For in accordance with the divine teachings, the acquisition of sciences and the perfection of the arts are considered as acts of worship. If a man engages with all his power in the acquisition of a science or in the perfection of an art, it is as if he has been worshiping God in the churches and temples. I do apologize. The bar is not allowing me to read the rest of that. Actually, Dawn, do you think you can read the rest of that?
Thus, as thou enterest a school of agriculture, and strivest in the acquisition of that science, thou art day and night engaged in acts of worship, acts that are accepted at the threshold of the Almighty. What bounty greater than this, that science should be considered an act of worship, and art a service to the kingdom of God?
Thank you so much. And agriculture is the natural sciences too. I mean, we're applying so much principles in entomology and agriculture, the natural sciences, the arborism, the list goes on with how much, and then there's also the writings of crises and victory. There are going to be crises when you start your projects in agriculture. The Japanese beetles are eating my peach trees. That's a crisis. That's one thing. So trying to find the victory over the crisis continually without giving up hope is something that actually takes practice and willpower. I do heartfelt say that because anytime we're let down on a creative project that we do and it goes backward, it's so easy to throw in the towel and quit. But that's not what God has asked us to do in the Baha'i writings. So here's a collection. That's my wife, Deshawn. We just had our first baby. She came June 6th, 2024. So she's a little over 3 weeks old. Hopefully I'm not showing my tiredness of being up every night. Trying not to. There's a picture of us in the greenhouse. That's an important picture. We have partnered with a Lansing food bank, Ingham County Food Bank. And all those plants you see in the greenhouse, 10 urban farms working in cooperative energy together so that the watering and the light and the maintenance of our greenhouse is maintained with little bits of work. Many hands make light work, and I have truly witnessed it working in that greenhouse. I go there once a week to water. And all the other farmers do the same thing. They take a day and they go there once a week to water, to vent it all. And we got fields in Lansing now. All of our half acres, all of our acres are being filled with these plants that start in the cold months in that greenhouse. Here's some pictures of some of the production that we have. There's Deshaun holding a sunflower. Last year, we did the Three Sisters, replacing corn with sunflowers because our nitrogen levels are sometimes hard to maintain. We had squash and pumpkins, really big. We had some 50-pound pumpkins last year. And we'll show more in the arts portion of what we did with those pumpkins too. And squash and beans. We had climber beans going up to sunflower stalks. Now, raspberries and strawberries are a big part. We've got strawberries perennial, raspberries perennial, a lot of our blueberries perennial. And so that perennial is a key component to permaculture. If anybody has some questions at the end, you can ask me anything on permaculture. I'm trying to kind of show you what our initiative is more than the sciences. But if you have any questions on permaculture, please ask me how to design. I can even help how to design your own permaculture zone. Those little pumpkins, that was from years ago when we were first getting established. They got stunted because weeds kind of took over and they could have been much bigger. Daisies is a nice perennial flower, and then cherries because we've got cherry trees. And there's Deshaun with her blue glove holding the first cherries to one of our 3-year-old trees, which finally produced. So it's a nice joy when a 3-year-old tree pushes some fruit out. Here's some of the ways I'm using my landscape talents to bring forth garden design and agricultural design. That's echinacea. That is a local Michigan staple, focusing on natural remedies. Echinacea's roots can become a tea that is a remedy for a lot of diseases that we suffer from as humans. Grapevines are very young. I actually planted, you see the daisies first, but then around the daisies, underneath that A-frame trellis, is grapevines that I planted from roots. And then 3 years later, they're finally up to my knees. And I would guess next year they will take off. I mean, especially with a mulch too, because mulch retains water, some of the scientific principles. In that stone circle, again, that's a landscape design. You don't truly see that too many times in agriculture. Those are roses. Now, permaculture does want something to bloom all the time. So I'm not going to skip on the flowers either. That's why you see the daisies, perennial, the roses in the stone circle. Here's that whole circle. You see me use the landscape fabric strawberry patch. We had Baha'is go to that strawberry circle this year. Came out 6 strawberry rhubarb pies at a circle this year. And one of them was made for Deshaun and I after we had our baby and delivered the really nice meal. One of the best pies I ever had. That was Ned and Jeslyn who did that, some of our local Baha'i members. There's Deshaun in front of some daffodils and hyacinths, and behind her some lavender. So you're seeing that I'm using a lot of perennial growing. I do annuals mixed in to block weeds and other things, but really focusing on transforming some of this property through strategic perennial projects. And there's our raspberries. Deshaun zoomed in. Those are thornless. I try to be as organic as I can. Thornless is a little bit genetically modified, but also it is safety for people who dive in on raspberries. 2 things: thorns can cut, and there's a companion plant by accident, black raspberries and raspberries, called poison ivy, and it grows underneath the undercarriage. And so we're trying to mitigate the poison ivy hazards of picking raspberries long term. There's some more. There's our cherry trees. You're seeing that I'm starting to get the hardscape and weed barrier through stones and landscape barriers. And that's a cherry tree right there. I've got tons of well, not tons of trees, but strategically planted trees. And then we got an Asian pear there. That Asian pear was a 5-year-old when I bought it. And now already this year, because we got blessed with really good soil. We got loamy, nutrient-rich soil. So I was able to put this tree straight into the ground. And now this year I've got about 250 Asian pears with no disease or no insect invasion on that tree. So we're doing really good. What you see in the middle here, that's where the raspberries are. Also with elderberries, those elderberries, they grow like bamboo and I didn't even know it. I planted them in the ground by root last year and they're already above our head and producing in just year two after planting them from root, from a bare root that we bought from a store. Notice in the pattern, this is permaculture. Notice in the pattern. This is us. We were incorporating the arts. So I want to start with all the neighborhood kids that are smiling and painting rocks. We had a program where we brought the youth in to paint all of our rocks around our strawberry circle, and they just had a blast. And then in the middle, that was another program where we brought in children from Grand Rapids. GR is one of our top Baha'i cities in the state of Michigan. There, it's got a lot of youth involved, and I think we can give thanks to David Douglas and others who have been, John Everett, some other individuals that have been really on the ground, knocking on doors and recruiting a lot of our youth. And then trucked them to Lansing, and these kids said that their best experience on their visit to Lansing, Michigan was when they came to our park, our 2-acre park here in Lansing. And I'm just, they're asking questions. This is them putting up a fence to protect our blueberry bushes of all things, very young blueberry bushes. And they wanted to get something on to feel like they were contributing some energy. And they helped me put a fence around my blueberries. And then there's some of our local Baha'is on another program. I think I was doing a Baha'is perspective of agriculture fireside. And there's a lot, some of our Baha'is on the left, Jean Gazelle, Ned Walker, Jeslyn Ingram, and another one of our friends. I wish I remembered everybody's name. Chloe, that's Chloe. And I'm getting asparagus. And asparagus is also a perennial crop once you get it rooted. But this is year one. It takes 3 years to get asparagus if you're doing it from scratch. This is year one of me explaining to them what the project is and what the long-term ideas are. All right, so we mentioned that we had 50-pound pumpkins. I intentionally had pumpkins from Jonathan's that, yes, genetically modified, they stay white. And I wanted them to stay white because I wanted a really good canvas to start an annual pumpkin painting day last year. And the neighborhood kids came in and a lot of the Baha'is came in and we painted our 50-pound pumpkins. And just had a really good event. Really did. The kids, some of the kids just were like Van Gogh. I had one that wasn't able to talk. He had a speech impediment. And so he was able to express himself by communicating, by putting his hands all over the pumpkin and painting, and he couldn't even stop. He painted one, then he painted two. By the time all the other kids were done their first one, he had done 5. This was just like a 6-year-old boy had 5 painted pumpkins. And then next, and this is at Unity Spiritual Center of Lansing. I do have 2 murals in the city, but this one I orchestrated to have the entire community do it instead. And so I went on the wall and I painted those angel, or some people call them butterfly wings, as a photo opportunity for the church. And then I orchestrated a drive-through where all the community members of that church and our Baha'i faith and come in and put their hands in paint and then put their hands in the wings to create the designs. And that was successful. That picture is just day one. We had multiple days of drive-throughs of hands coming in and putting their hands in paint and then in the walls. Now, if you were to see where I'm standing there, if you back me up and put me up against the butterfly wings, you'll see that I'm now the one that's wearing the wings, and it becomes a good photo opportunity to be wearing those butterfly wings. Now, last year when I did this presentation for Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, I showed the other mural that I did that's been seen by at least 500,000 people on Pennsylvania Avenue. And I'm kind of anonymous there. As an artist, I call myself the original wayfarer. So I don't put my name on anything. That way there everyone can feel like you are the wayfarer dearly beloved. My and and I want people to just feel like it is your journey. No matter what I do, I want to kind of separate from my writing or even my artwork and have you feel like you're the one that's the protagonist in the journey. I think that's important also for the Baha'i writings too. That we kind of have people feel like it's Don's journey, it's Lee's journey, it's William's journey. It's not CJ's journey, and my journey is an independent one connected to the whole. So we did hide there. My wife is very intelligent. She's a second grade school teacher here in inner city Lansing, and she knows the privacy. And so we hid the kids' faces. I think we should have done it to all of them, unless we get consent from the parents to put the pictures of their children in some of these. So we hid their faces with beautiful pink hearts. We thought that was good. So yeah. And so, and this here is a picture at the, we brought it, we had a big day of service in a devotional prayer. Or maybe this was a feast, I don't remember, because we've been hosting feasts at Norwood Gardens too here in inner city Lansing. And this is in front of our strawberry circle, and a lot of our members were there that day. And Ann Stanton, the woman with the black mask, she got these banners, the year of the fruits of one tree and the leaves of one branch, one of the most recited Baha'i quotes for our interfaith communities and our Baha'i initiatives. And that there, my friend Don, I'm not sure how much more time we have, but that is the end of this slideshow. And I'd love to answer as many questions as I can get, if you can delegate that for me.
Sure, if you just stop sharing screen now. We'll be able to see everyone.
And you can ask me science questions too, anything on anything that you have, and I'll do the best that I can, okay?
All right. If anyone has any thoughts or any questions they want to share, please, raise your hand. That was a lot, CJ.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful to see all the different things that you're involved in, many different levels. You talk about all these different levels of interaction, the individual, the community, and, the societal, institutional level as well. Very important.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I do see a couple of hands raised. I see 3. I'll start with Helga.
Right.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was really very instructive. A couple of questions.
Sure.
I know the area a little bit. I know it's very industrial. I live in Pittsburgh, which is also very industrial. In fact, we have a permaculture design farm that educates youth smack next to a steel mill. When I visited that once, I was amazed. How can you do it in that location? So remediation of all these environmental toxins, how do you do that? That was question number 1. And question number 2 is, if you have raised beds and you work a lot with raised beds, have you ever experimented with these so-called hügels where you bury the wood underneath the soil and then get the benefit of the decaying wood, keep moisture in and fertilizing?
Good questions. I love it. The first industrial, what I'm doing is following organic guidelines by setting myself 5 or 10 feet on every property. I do have an industrial property on the west side. There's a chain link fence that's about 10 feet tall, and it goes straight from my good, healthy, loamy soil right into asphalt for the border, water, and light. And so it goes straight into industrial right on my western border. What I have is a giant maple tree that almost fences, blocks the vision of that, because this is a very old maple tree, right? So it's huge and it's right in the center of my fence and it's blocking that vision, but it's also given me my standardized codes for organic farming by creating that 10-foot buffer zone between the industrial. Now, also, in order to acquire these properties, you have to remember something I didn't mention in the presentation. These are remediated properties that used to have houses and they got demolished. And so we've had to deal with the concrete, and what I've been doing is just continuously keeping true to my organic principles and pulling all of the inorganic material that exists out, extracting, and then building up new soils and compost 4 to 6 or even 8 inches up on all of the 2 acres. Every time I plant something, I am using and lifting my soil with new healthy compost, which comes from the Ingham County Land Bank because we have services in Lansing. So we do have the compost to be able to build up. And then I'm staying true to not using any chemicals. Anything that's inorganic, pesticide or herbicides, I'm choosing to intentionally do companion planting. I'm doing heavy studies, the metaphorical iceberg of the tip and then everything under the water. I am studying heavy on any calamity that I see, problem that I see, and then remedying it with an organic solution. And then the second one, Helga, yes, not on my own properties, but I went to Desert Rose Baha'i Institutes right when my wife got pregnant at the start, maybe I want to say about 8 months ago. I got a tour of Desert Rose Baha'i Institute from their workers and saw what they were doing to do the remediation process at Desert Rose, and that's exactly how they're doing it, to preserve water mainly. It's different when you're living in the land of water, which is Michigan, surrounded by Great Lakes, always getting rain, versus going to Desert Rose Baha'i Institute where rain is all but not. So it's been a fun study to get both extremes there. Thank you so much. Arthur?
I'm just wondering how much you've combined your work with the gardening with other needs of the community. For instance, where I'm in a suburb of Geneva in Switzerland, and our city government has try to reduce the heat island effect in cities, encouraged more tree planting, and in particular, where there's a bit of land in an industrial area that's not being used for anything, they've created sort of micro forests, following sort of a Japanese process, planting lots of trees and plants very close together to recreate quite rapidly a whole forest ecosystem as a belt of green around the industrial buildings. The other thing that has been done in the same neighborhood, they've put quite a few raised beds to encourage local people to do some gardening. But the most recent set of raised beds, they combined it with a social purpose. So they said, these beds are available to anybody in the neighborhood who will partner with a newly arrived refugee to help them to integrate into the community. And by gardening together with a refugee, it helps them do something. They can produce some food. They feel they belong. So there are ways in which you can combine your expertise in landscaping with other kinds of social needs and do multiple purposes for the community. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Actually, our partners include the Ingham County Land Bank. It includes the Lansing Food Bank. And we were trusted with these properties given to me essentially for nothing as a neighborhood rejuvenation project. Right away, we're already taking a social initiative and saying yes and maintaining these properties. That was when I came out of the Michigan State University's organic farm program, the university known for agriculture in the country. And they said, this is one of our top students. We are going to trust with these properties. Now the fence is as far as the trees, yes, I'm planting orchards, but another even stronger stand against what I would call, in our case, New Zealand, you had a reason. Our reason is urban sprawl. We're on the outskirts of urban sprawl. Now, if you're on the outskirts, you can take a direct initiative to combat urban sprawl by growing trees and stopping the industrial and residential growth. And so our 10 and 20-foot buffers are intentionally not touched. And I have seen a transformation in the last 3 years of its height as it grows. I let it be tall grass, and now it's tall weeds, and now it's tall trees and vines, and it's naturally getting all this indigenous trees that is taken over the entire surrounding area. And then we're keeping everything else neatly cut with our mowers, and strategically planting even more trees, the peach trees, the pear trees, the cherry trees, I mean, I've got the blueberries that are essentially trees. All of the planting, taking advantage. Of course, an advantage we have when it comes to orchards in Lansing. We're on a grid. We know exactly where north, south, east, and west is, because the grid infrastructure in Lansing was built according to the sun's movement, and so we have an easy formation of a permaculture based off sun's location, day after day. So. Thank you so much, Arthur, for bringing that to attention. We are definitely focused on ending urban sprawl in our area. Thank you. Lee, I definitely had your hand up for a while, so let's call on you.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One, I really loved the idea of doing a fireside in the garden. And I'd love to hear more about the experience of that. Was that sharing with Baha'is the importance of agriculture, or was it the wider community? A little bit more about that, and then I have a second question.
Sure. Let's first off, I got to know Paul Hanley pretty well when I took the Wilmet's course in Baha'is perspective of agriculture. It really goes to when I was in Paul's course and became friends with Paul there, that I learned the term Baha'is perspective of agriculture. And then I incorporated my design of the fireside was with that title, Baha'is perspective of agriculture. And it was, of course, Baha'is, we are not one religion. We are all religions. We are Christian Baha'is, Muslim Baha'is, Hindu Baha'is, Buddhist Baha'is, every faith. We must be taking the principle of interfaith relations and the unity of faith and running with that, not calling ourselves Baha'is, but friends of the faith. Everyone must be radically included in our religion to truly save humanity and to truly follow Baha'u'llah. I wish to say that. So everybody in our community was welcome. Everybody was welcome. And that will always be the case with me.
Right, but like, how did it go? Like, who came and what,
Yep. Because we're in a community with lots of children, we did have people in our direct remote community come. Of course, the leaders of it was our Baha'is, our committed Baha'is, but I think that's always going to be the case as Baha'is inviting friends of the faith and such. Our initiative is to lead, and then those who want to learn more about our initiatives will come. And we did have people of the direct remote community. We had some individuals who were not even, we had some agnostics that were there that were interested just in the science of the gardening. And then we had our core Baha'is of our community.
Awesome. And then my second question is related to, just several experiences that some junior youth groups have had in starting some community, urban community gardening projects, and just some of the challenges they face in like sustaining that. And I wonder if you have any insights on, engage in terms of who does the work in the garden, and how you take turns watering, like if you have any insights on how the engaging families and the broader community and in the maintenance and care of the garden so that it's sustainable.
Yeah, that is a challenge. You're going to need someone who is definitely holding down the ground, somebody who's definitely committed. When people come in, I think my trick of the trade has been to say yes to anyone who has offered work or service, and then provide the work that I know is necessary. But because I'm holding down the ground, I'm maintaining. But then I've had a lot of individuals who I've incorporated. I've just never said no to anybody. That's been the trick with my particular case. Lansing, I'm not sure where your location is, Lee, and I could provide a little bit more knowing your situation, but mine is crime-ridden, drug addicted. We don't go door to door. If we go door to door, I might get shot. I'm gonna be honest with you. So I don't go door to door. I wait till those come to me. Very good, wise information for those who live in areas where drug addiction is rampant. But if your case is different, you just have to understand and know. And ABS, I mean, anybody in the school world, you're gonna have to know the personalities and traits of those who are involved. Your youth, you need to look honestly with your youth and love their eagerness, but be honest about their skill sets. And not judge them for someone going off track too. I feel like a non-judgment when they go off track is also so important, but knowing their personalities and their characters and their skill sets of who's on your team or who's sharing a wanting to be of service to your property, that's going to be very important. And it's a skill of its own accord, I think. But and never forcing anything, let them, I mean, the creative forces always kind of leak out of all of us. I mean, everybody in this room, you're going to have a creative force that leaks out, and then just saying yes to that. Hopefully that answers the question. Mine is a little bit different of a case because this neighborhood is dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So
there was a question in the chat and it kind of disappeared. Asking about, is there advantages to raised beds as opposed to in ground? I don't know if you covered any of that.
Oh, that's a good question. Before I get to you, Christine or William, I definitely will answer that question. I do see your hands raised, so I do want to recognize that. There is pros and cons for everything. Let's not just say there's absolutely a better way. In urban environment, we have a regulation by the city that says that we maintain all of our lawns to 6 inches or less. And then we do get fined by Lansing if it goes over 6 inches of $125. Yeah, there's some, but that's not in every city. That is one of the bureaucratic things that I'm dealing with an administration that is kind of autocratic. But so raised beds is right away it's a pro because now I can weed whip the raised beds and hire a mower to come in and keep it cut on a regular basis. So that's one of the pros. Another pro is you can maintain the depths of your compost and your nutrient-rich soils and such. I mean, you're not certain without getting a lab test on your soils in the ground. But if you're backfilling compost into your raised beds, you know right away that you're going to have nutrient-rich soil. And one of the negatives of water retainment, and weed invasion and water retainment is struggles when it comes to raised beds. You can use cardboard and other things or mulch to combat both. Mulch is a good water retainment and it's a good weed suffocator around your plants and such in the raised beds, but you're still going to have to water a lot more. So you'd be thinking about irrigation because it dries out fast. The ground retains water faster. More. Does that answer the question, do we feel? There's certainly weighing pros and cons on any of your decision making. Give you the opposite. If you grow in a field, the mowing is going to be a lot harder. The weeds that get tall, if you don't get to the weeds in time, are not going to be able to be mowed over, or as opposed to just being pulled out of a raised bed. So.
Right. Thank you. That's great.
You're welcome. Go ahead, Christine. Let's call Christine Muller.
Thank you. That's really very interesting what you're doing. And I wonder, I've never heard of your project, and I'm very interested in these things. So I conclude that it may not be true, but that most Baha'is in the United States, for example, are not aware of your project. And there are many Baha'i centers. There is Greenacre Baha'i School that is not very environmentally sustainable in its landscaping. So I wonder, how could your project be featured and inspire others? And how could that knowledge of yours be shared to Baha'i centers, to Greenacre Baha'i schools, and anyone else? You know, how could it be better known so that it could be replicated? Not exactly the same way, but that would get the idea, and maybe, if needed, ask for help or advice, you know. Do you have any thoughts on that, or anyone else?
Actually, I do. I would love to let you know I've been gaining steam on this project, but I'm also one of the two that restored Louhelen Baha'i Center here in Michigan. I've been working at Louhelen for 6 years. And not directly employed by them, but contracted through my for-profit company, DoVine Landscaping. When COVID struck, a lot of people don't realize Louhelen's infrastructure and grounds were in absolute flux. It was on the way out. And then COVID came, and nobody else was at Louhelen for 2 years during COVID, except Fred Kester and myself. And we spent the entire time rebuilding the school, the campus, through my building skill sets too, and restoring the entire 110-acre grounds. And now people that are going there are just saying thank you. They are loving Louhelen currently right now. We do want to do that at Bosch too. Bosch had the fire that burned down a lot of their school, sadly enough. I see Jay putting his hand on his head. I'm not sure if that's due to knowing what happened to Bosch. And then, you know, it's interesting that you're talking about Greenacre, and I didn't even know it. I wasn't a Baha'i. I was a practicing Episcopalian. I lived about 30 minutes away from Greenacre for 32 years. I'm a 40-year-old man now, but I lived in New Hampshire, Dover, New Hampshire, for 32 years. I even sat on your city councils and planning boards when I was getting my bachelor's in public administration. And then I resigned all those posts to come out here 8 years ago. So this is getting a headway. I've given presentations to Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, even traveled to Arizona to help them build a fence for their agricultural programs. Gave this presentation there in person, and gave this presentation to a crowd about as large as this last year on Zoom. So I think we're getting some headway in regards to this initiative. Thank you.
Right. I was wondering if maybe someone could suggest American Baha'i do a story about you. I think that would be a great thing to do.
I would.
About,
thank you.
About your work.
Thank you so much. I got goosebumps with you saying that. I feel like it's my calling. God has been leading every step of the way, and I have myself and many others too. Fred, if we do that, I would love to incorporate my team. Fred Kester, I mean, let me give a shout out. Anybody who knows Fred Kester, who's been holding the grounds crew manager position at Louhelen Baha'i School, the man has been steadfast. And just, I mean, in his age, being 71 and still keeping up with me. And I mean, he has just saved Louhelen Baha'i School. So we give Fred Kester a round of applause. And I would like to incorporate my team if we do that. William, please, it's your turn. I think you are still muted, William.
There we go. Okay, I've just got 2 quick questions. One is, how do you deal with slugs?
Oh, grubs. Yeah, no, and so organically.
No, slugs. Slugs.
Is there a specific slug you're thinking of currently?
Oh, they're brown and they're about an inch long.
In entomology, every invasion of bugs are going to be different depending on where you are. So
Okay.
that my particular issue is in Japanese beetles, which are transferred. They're not just beetles. When they're in their larvae state, they are a grub that's white with a red head that eat off the roots of a lot of your plants under the ground, and then they go through a transformational stage, and they become the Japanese beetle in their adult in their adult state to eat foliage off a lot of your trees, and they can even kill your trees. So how I'm dealing with them, and I think I would take this same initiative
No,
in this
excuse me.
thought process. I'll answer. I want to answer the question first. I want to
No.
let you. I'm doing companion planting. But go
Right,
ahead.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's what I was
All
getting
right.
to. Is I'm doing companion
I see.
planting.
All right.
And if you do the same thing with I would just use your Google and find an identification of the bug that you have, and then find out what
Okay.
it doesn't like. In my
Okay,
case, Japanese beetle does not, in its larvae state, does not like oregano roots, and so I intentionally grow oregano to make it so the grubs are dying off because they don't have a food source that they like under the soil before they transform. And then I'm
okay,
using neem oil too on the leaves to prevent. Neem oil is an organic spray that is produced from the neem tree that is pretty good at eradicating a lot of your aphids and your beetles and such on contact.
okay. The other question I had, I planted blueberries and I planted
Mhm.
elderberries.
Mhm.
When I came back the next year, I planted about 6 plants. When I
Mhm.
came back the next year, they were gone.
Yeah. So
Who
soil
eats them?
pH.
What eats it?
Blueberries is probably your pH level. Elderberries, I would be surprised that elderberries died, but I would not be surprised if your blueberries died. They need an acidity level of 4.5 in the soil, so you need peat moss and
Okay.
pine needles and things to ensure that your blueberries have a soil pH of 4.5 acidity. Elderberries can stay around a 7.0 and even a little bit of basic soil conditions and thrive. But they are not companion plants. They cannot be grown together. You need to quarantine your blueberry bushes and maintain pH level of your soil.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Jay, go ahead.
You're muted, Jay.
There you are.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
great. It's nice to meet you, Pratt.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm kind of going down a parallel path with you. I'm in a low equity neighborhood. I'm doing French intensive gardens. And one of the things you were talking about the raised beds, and so I wanted to, and also in your bio you mentioned that you were looking for garden design, and so I wanted to share one of the things I've done is I've placed plants like lilies. Well, my approach was to design the garden like I would a monument sign in front of a shopping center, so that it looks beautiful instead of like a raggedy garden.
Sure.
So I have borders. I use a lagoon, monkey grass, and then I have boxwoods, which are ornamental plants, which after 3 or 4 years, I end up selling the boxwoods, and they make more money than the agriculture does. And so I have a nice frame, and that keeps the weeds out.
Yeah.
The muted grass and things like that don't go in. We get a little bit of seed things that come in, but with the mulches, I do a lot of composting and stuff too. And then another thing I wanted to mention, the flowers and things. And one thing that's been successful with me this year, I've been working on it for years and spreading the plants around, but I've started selling plants to florists. And again, they're mixing the ornamental plants and the agricultural plants is kind of working out good in that way. But I have a lot of beds that are just ornamental and around houses. So the income streams would be well, I guess I mentioned the ornamental plants and the flowers and the vegetables are 3 different income streams. And I'll end up getting your email and stay in touch with you.
Oh, thank you, Jay. Thank you so much. Yeah, and it's important to know that even though we're Baha'is, there's a principle, the extremes of the eradication of wealth and poverty. We want to be making money off of what we're doing. to reinvest. It can't just all render to absolute service. We need to be thinking about revenue streams and keeping a revenue stream coming in, or else it's not sustainable. Economics so important. So we want to say thank you for saying that. And a beautiful thing with the boxwoods and the ornamental grasses turns to be a really, really good fence too. I mean, a natural fence line of boxwoods and ornamental grasses, such a beautiful thing to look at, and it blocks lots and lots of your weeds while creating a friendly neighborly border between properties. That's a beautiful image. Thank you for sharing, Jay. It's really nice. Thank you. Winona.
You mentioned being on the city council.
Yeah.
And that's one of the very big interests I have these days about governance, because we can't get climate change right or agriculture right in our cities. You mentioned that ordinance about 6-inch grass. Having been on the city council, I'd like some advice, because our spiritual assembly has just made a climate action task force. And we are committed to going the first Monday of every month when people in the community have 3 minutes to offer their issues. And what we've done so far is be sure that we always tell our city council how grateful we are for their service, because we've noticed that other people just start out scolding and not understanding what sacrifice these folks are doing. But I'm thinking about, how do we approach from the money budget aspect of this, because there's so much that a city could do if they did allow like meadows in areas where it's not important to cut back. If you're in an area where there's lots of snakes, I can see the issue. But even in our countryside in North Carolina, where a person has 2 acres, there's so much recreational mowing going on. Carbon in the atmosphere and the cost to the family budget isn't it? So have you got some advice on the language to use with the city?
I do. Let me share my experience first. There was 2 sides of the coin. My city council was corrupt. And corruption is a hard thing to deal with as Baha'is. They were only for corporate America. And I think you're going to run into that in a lot of your councils throughout the entire country. To be honest with you, there's so much bureaucracy, there's so much imbalance of socioeconomics, and those who are presenting building projects to city councils and planning boards are mostly coming in to rebuild or a new Walmart, a new Target, and all these corporate zones. And I think because I grew up really poor, I've been homeless twice. I came from the gutters. I mean, my mother and I moved 20 times before I was the age of 14 because of evictions consistently happening. It was drugs in my family, alcohol, all sorts of things. It was a hard upbringing. And I had that kind of experience to know the sociological needs of people of poverty. And so I defended that. And when I was listening to people like you, Winona, and your groups coming in, I actually gave them hope. The other eight council members, was it? I don't remember how much. Maybe I was the 7th member or something, but I don't remember exactly. But the others were all for saying yay immediately to the designs of these corporate companies. Where I started drawing in large crowds like what we have here because I was listening and defending the people who were the residents of, this was Dover, New Hampshire, and I was defending the residents against the capitalistic approaches that this city was corrupt for. But then there was the other advantage. Capital. I'm going to give you the advice at the end of the story. The other side of the fence was that we were, as the planning board members, we were bringing forth designs for our public facilities, our schools, our gray zones, our parks and recreational, and designing rain gardens and new stages and recreational forms in which we can look at climate change with honesty and have a direct say. Because believe me, there's little say when somebody wants to build a Walmart. It's asphalt. It's all they're coming in with. That's it. They're gonna kill the whole entire property to get as much cars in as they can, to get as much money as they can, unfortunately. Now, my advice to you, take the small business approach. They want plans. They want plans. And then you can go in and give as many speeches as you can give, but mostly they're going to say no. And then they're going to say Dunkin' Donuts, yes. I promise you. I ran into that. They think it's job growth to have Dunkin' Donuts. So, but if you have the property and you have the plans and you present the plans, they will say yes for you too. They will. So if you have a beautiful rain garden design and you're trying to save, for water and irrigation and for your neighbors and such, but you have the property and you have the plans brought forth and drawn out, you're more likely to succeed. They want to see it before they say yay. That's my advice to you.
Thanks. There's a question here in the chat. It says, we know that agriculture is the fundamental basis of the community, and it feels like there are many layers to this quote from Abdu'l-Baha. On a basic level, if we don't have food, we can't do anything. I'd be interested to hear from your experience different ways in which you've maybe seen this quote be reflected in reality.
Yes, yeah, food security was the topic of our presentation last time for Desert Rose Baha'i Institute, and we should be staying focused. And the direct time was COVID, right at the beginning of COVID. The markets collapsed. Even the corporations pulled food from the shelves to feed the wealthy, forgetting about the poor. They felt COVID was a big problem. So you started seeing empty shelves because the wealthy were feeding their own families. Immediately, you could see even Costco box stores being empty. But our Baha'i community gathered up resources, made boxes of food, and delivered them, hand drove them, and dropped them on our homeless doorsteps throughout COVID. We got lists and we made boxes here in Lansing, and we dropped them off individually to them. The need for food security is so essential. We know if food supplies run short, the famines will follow. And anything like COVID or a natural disaster will prove that and can happen overnight. Even tonight, Yellowstone could blow. Boom. Food security becoming the top issue and the top priority. I hope that answers the question. We all saw COVID. We all went through that together. So I think that's the best example we can have on that. Helga.
Yeah, I was wondering if anybody has experience in integrating, like there's this Ruhi sequence. There's one booklet that is on social action. And I know that, for example, book one was, there was training for going through book one with a lens on racial justice. So I was wondering if anybody has experience of going through this book on social action with a lens of agriculture. I mean, all the examples we get are typically from other countries. Very little that is like applies to our situation here.
Yeah, that's social action. Yeah, I've taken much of the Ruhi books, Ruhi 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, and 8. 7 and 8 with June Thomas, our delegate from Michigan. And yeah, when I was in the Ruhi 1s, Ruhi 2s, I wasn't really focused on talking too much on agriculture. There's a lot of quotes that can be directly applied to agriculture or the arts or any other sciences, any other creative force that can have an action-packed solution to what we're learning in Ruhi 1 and Ruhi 2. I think Paul Hanley would be the best. Arthur Dahl, I know I've seen him with Paul in the past for sure. Applying the new publication, by the way, Odyssea by Paul Hanley, directly reading and then directly applying his teachings to the Ruhi 1 and Ruhi 2s would really get us kickstarted. Here in Lansing, I am starting a book study on Odisea, and maybe we should all be thinking about starting a book study on Odisea currently in the present day. Definitely, because we need more action and less talk, or more consultation and more action, for sure. And agriculture is a learning process, but it's an action-packed process. Let me know if that answers you, Helga, or is there any other follow-ups? I'm not sure.
So basically, we have to start it up.
It has to start and it has to maintain. I feel like maintenance is the focal point of agriculture. Starting is a passion. Everybody wants to start it, but the maintenance, that's the word.
Yeah, definitely. I'm here with a community garden. I see that. Everybody's there for the planting, but then the watering is a little more difficult.
Yeah, and the maintenance, the weeds. If you don't beat the weeds by July 4th, there won't be any fireworks. But if you beat the weeds by July 4th, you most likely won. Jay, I think your hand was next.
All righty. So I was going to respond to Winnie's question about how to deal with the city council. I used to be an urban designer, so I agree with what you said about the city councilmen are sometimes influenced by the money. Not only just I don't like the word corruption, but just the people who design the city are the ones that have the money, that pay for the plans and pay for the projects. And the council people and others are looking for build a tax base, but that doesn't give us the best results. As from the Baha'i perspective, we need to build communities. And so that's why I would say every community needs a development plan of their own, so that if somebody comes with some predatory plan, they can say this doesn't fit our community plan. And I also wanted to mention what the Universal House of Justice said in the Plan for Prosperity. And this isn't a direct quote, but they talked about predetermined alternatives to predetermined plans. They were talking about citizens' participation, and they don't really participate much because they're all only offered predetermined alternatives to predetermined plans. So they're really not starting off with the beginning of the planning process. And so the free minute with the city council is not going to do any good at all. But you could meet with the neighborhood associations and and build a constituency with maybe university professors. If the plan is something of significance, you can build a constituency. And so that's about it.
Very good. Yeah, the plan is the important part. Draw up your plan and get your unification, the unification of your team. Come together, consult, draw up your plan, and get ready to present it not once, not twice, but 3 times. As many times as you can present and edit your plan. Councils and planning boards want a clean plan. They want to know from start all the way to finish. Thank you for adding to that, Jay. Absolutely. They want the action, they want the plans. For that, I think Richard was next, Winona, if you're okay to hold. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to respond to some things that you had shared, as well as the question that Helga asked with regards to the study of Book 13 as it relates to its involvement with agriculture. We live in a very small community, primarily agricultural, about 10 miles from city area. And the community here started when I say community, I'm referring to the Baha'i community. There was a small handful of folks who started what they referred to as a Sustainable Resource Committee, and inspired by the study of Book 13. At the very heart of that, there was lots of invitations around the conferences that were held, that were asked to be held, by the Universal House of Justice. We put on 2 different conferences inviting the agricultural community to join in, and did activities within those conferences that were basically community building in nature. And out of that also has occurred multiple other activities, at least once a quarter, sometimes more often, involving the agricultural community. But I would say that looking at Book 13 in isolation is probably not a sustainable process, but really looking at Book 13 as a result of all of the qualities and characteristics, attitudes, and habits that we were to be developing in those earlier books, that really social action should come out of those activities where we are engaging those protagonists, like your project that you're doing, CJ, in your community. If we start something ourselves and we're only doing it ourselves from our own vision, and others aren't included in that vision as a part of a nucleus who sees themselves and inviting protagonists to join in on that process, I don't see that being sustainable. But at the very heart of the Institute process, I think that if growth comes organically, engaging community, then that will be a more sustainable process. I think that's really the spirit of Book 13.
Absolutely. I am not someone who completed Book 13. I am very thankful for you for bringing that forward, for sure. But there's two things. First, the internal change, internal transformation for everyone in this room. There is something we all need to work on in eradicating: human pride. Human pride. If we stop saying I and we start truly saying we, applying principles like radical inclusion, lifting each other up with words of affirmation, and really building a team fortified around humility, the opposite of pride, then we're going to sustain. We'll sustain the teams and the service workers and such because they feel included and accepted. And that is the internal change we all have to in order to succeed in any creative endeavor, whether it's in the arts or agriculture or the sciences. If it's I, then it's you in the field. If it's we, then it's we in the field. Thank you, Richard. Winona.
I wanted to give some hope because I live in a small city and our Baha'is are a very small group. We have about maybe 32 on the rolls and about 15 that are active in any way, but we are very active within our city. So we've become known. And I think that has led us to be agents for Baha'u'llah when we speak. And one of the things that I think people hunger for is that you mentioned humility, that spiritual attribute that people want is that we need the material, but we also need the spiritual. So the dynamic coherence of the spiritual and practical, when people hear that, they really respond. And through it, our city has established with the Baha'i Championship a monthly inspirational gathering in our most depressed part of the city, where people live 17 years shorter lifespan than they do in another part of this very small city, maybe about 8 miles away. So I think if we inculcate in our own minds, what is it that these folks need? They also need to know how to consult. Anybody that's been on a committee for a city may know that they don't know how to do that. It's not ill will, it's lack of education. And so that's one way that we can help to encourage. But I'm very encouraged by our city council because in the last 5 years, everyone who lives here agrees. Well, I don't know everyone, but so many people know we've got an entirely different city council that really represents the strata of the city. So I think that Baha'u'llah's message infuses, and if we just follow that integrative chain of command from on high, I've got a lot of hope. So
yeah,
yeah.
thank you. There's some principles I'm hearing you here in the Baha'i writings. One is that we're spiritual beings living in a physical reality. And the recognition of spiritual beings living in a physical reality from an internal thought process, so important for all of us to know that that is in fact true. And there was another principle I may have and that I heard through there. I'm kind of forgetting what I was thinking there or feeling too. But I want to say I'm sorry to use the word corruption too, Jay. In my case, I really did feel that I was younger too, by the way. I was fresh out of college. I was 27, 28 years old. And I was the one that was the target. I actually got pulled aside by the other councilmen and told that I couldn't vote against the corporation in silence. That is corruption to me. They pulled me aside when I stood for the people. An 8-1 vote came across, and then they pulled me aside and said, "You cannot vote against these big money people." And I did again because I have to stand true to my principles. I was seeing massive amounts of people like this group coming forth and telling you why we couldn't build what we could build, and they told me I couldn't vote for the people. That wasn't going to happen. But guess what? Here in the Baha'i, there's the other principle, consultation, teaching consultation, because we need to be consulting and being courageous enough to vote against things that is not sustainable in our communities and being honest. But that doesn't happen when there's big money involved. And thank you for recognizing that too, Jay. The big money was in fact involved with these buildings. So, yeah. You are muted, Jay. You are definitely muted.
The corruption is very real. If I use that word, I'd be using it all the time. So I just quit using that word, but it's out there all the time. So I didn't mean that you weren't using it rightly, but I just
wanted to give you a
word.
true life experience of being pulled aside. I stood for the people. They didn't like that. They stood for the corporations. And who's creating jobs when we have AI? I'm sorry. I just wanted to say that they used the job creation as the excuse, and then I look and I'm standing in the longest line to self-checkout at the grocer. I'm like, that's not a job creation.
We can share horrible stories sometime.
Yeah, we don't want to go off too many of the tandems here because I'm sure for those who do know me that tandems are regular. And I'm doing a pretty good job being grounded on this one. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Folks, we're getting close to time. If there are any more comments, please feel free to share now.
Well, I was just going to share one thing on this subject of corruption that's really, because I've just been re-listening to a set of talks that Hooper Dunbar did on his book, Forces of Light and Darkness. And it really, I think, is a key moment in our nation's history for us to be very clear about these forces and their impact on us, and especially on our children and the youth, if we plan to battle them.
Beautiful. There's a virtue there. It's called temperance, the marriage of darkness and light, the acceptance of our angels and our demons. The only way to go forward.
Lee, one of the things that I'm trying to practice is just look at God's hand. I mean, things could change in a moment if our Creator decided, but I think it's quite clear from previous information we've had that we learn from our own misery what we want and what we don't want. And at this point in America, it's being taught, what do we want and what do we not want? And we may have to get a lot of what we don't want before we realize what we do want and do
Yeah.
something about it.
That's true. And acceptance of what we've done to hurt others. I remember a great man in history. I think his name was Jesus. And I think he said, those who have not sinned, cast the first stone. One of the most quoted of quotes in human history. And what does that mean? We've all sinned, my friends. What does that mean? We all have demons. What does that mean? We accept our misery to go forward. Thank you.
All right. Well, what a fascinating discussion we've had today. Thank everyone for being here, and thank you, especially CJ, for sharing all your information. Our
Thank you.
prayers are with you for continued success. And so thank you, everyone.
You're very welcome, Don. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Guys, have a great day. Aloha, friends. Take care.
I'll be sending you an email.
Thank you, Jay. And anybody who wants information, Don,
Aloha.
you have the rights to share, okay?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we'll
Very
do.
well.
Send me an email. Thanks.
Take care.